You're listening to Civic Media. You can tune into any of our live shows on any radio station across the state with the Civic Media app. Find us in your phone's app store and listen anytime, anywhere.
Hello and welcome to the Dr. Kristen Lyerly Show. I'm your host, Dr. Kristen Lyerly, and I biked to work today because it's Bike Week.
I was kind of surprised to see that. I'm not going to lie to you. I was like, you bike everywhere, don't you?
Hey, as much as I can. It is so nice outside, though. It's like finally we've hit that point where it's warm and it's...
Yeah, you still wouldn't see me doing that. So would not be doing that.
And that is the luscious voice of Todd Michaels, who is producing our show today. Hey, guess what we're going to talk about? We're talking about Pride.
Yeah.
It's Pride Month. It's June. And there are no better advocates to talk about Pride in Northeast Wisconsin than my friends who are here today. I've got Dana Johnson. Jackson, I almost said. Dana Johnson. I've only known you for 5 years. Dana Johnson, who is the president and lead organizer with Fox Valley Pride. Yes. Welcome, Dana.
Good morning. Thanks for having me, Kristen. It's good to see you.
And you brought along a friend of yours, Mel Davis, who is the executive director of Rainbow Alliance Advocacy. Welcome, Mel.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me. And thanks, Dana, for inviting me.
Of course.
You know, it's all about connection and conversation and uplifting each other. And that is what Dana has done in my life.
I try. And again, our community, particularly the LGBTQIA2S plus community, we need to band together, right? And so the opportunity for us to do that, bring shared voices to the table is awesome.
It is awesome.
Yeah.
And you just rattled out an acronym.
Yes.
That was a lot of fun.
And I do it very quickly, you know.
You do it. Like
Say it a lot.
I got lost at the end there.
Okay.
So maybe just keeping in mind that our audience is probably not as knowledgeable as you or me. Definitely not the two of you. So can we start with the acronym and start with some just common basic definitions?
Sure, we can go quickly through that if you want. You want me to start or you want to start?
Slow it down, though.
Okay.
Say it slower.
So L, lesbian.
So that means?
Generally, when you have a female gendered woman attracted and or emotionally and romantically involved with someone who is also a lesbian or female.
L.
Yeah, so generally female identifying people.
Yeah. G, gay. So males in general.
Same thing, but
same
males.
deal. Identifying. Although sometimes, generally that's what we think.
Gay, although, can be all-encompassing.
Yep.
So I tend to use gay as like all the letters because it's a very simple way of just saying everyone.
Yeah.
Because it gets like, the acronym gets long. And I think for a lot of people, they don't exactly know. And that we should definitely talk about discomfort that people have when they're talking with folks from the community and they're not wanting to make mistakes. And so that they're afraid to enter into these conversations. Yeah. So it's helpful to know that it's okay just to say gay.
For sure.
Yeah,
and
typically.
And I think in the order, it sort of matters in a way. The order matters.
It does matter.
And most people, LGB, so then we got bisexual. And then we have transgender.
Wait, bisexual.
That's me.
Tell us about you, Mel. What does it mean?
Bisexual is when you are either romantically or sexually attracted to more than one gender. And it doesn't necessarily mean just two. It means simply more than one. And that can be anything, really.
That's confusing because...
It depends on the person.
But bi, I mean, if the etymology of the word means two.
Right.
It does. And that can be confusing for people, especially, and that's why a lot of people use pansexual as well, because pansexual does mean all-encompassing. The difference between bisexual and pansexual is that and for people who are bisexual, gender does play a role. So where someone might be attracted to, let's say someone who is masculine identifying and masculine presenting, as well as feminine presenting and feminine identifying, a pansexual person does not care whatsoever in any way.
It's about the person, not their gender or how they identify.
Right. So not to say that a bisexual person necessarily does have those parameters, but, they can. Yeah. So that's the general premise about why they're different.
And I think we have to go back to the original kind of social construct of humanity, although not in all cultures, right? But in Western culture in particular, we have a history of just saying there's either male or female. So when you think about bisexuality, it really stems from the bi side of that dichotomy of male, female gender. So, and again, sometimes we're emboldened by these terms because they were used to oppress us. So when we get to the T, we have transgender, and then we get to Q, right? We have queer. And a lot of times people are like, oh, we shouldn't use the queer word because that was a word, kind of used as a slur back in the day. But we do know that a lot of times when people feel oppressed for who they are, they then are emboldened by those terms and then use that term. And again, queer was much more encompassing because people wanted to identify kind of it before pansexual was a thing. Before,
that's fairly new.
Yeah, before a lot of those other words, that was generally just the piece that people hung on to.
And originally, queer was actually a positive thing. So there are some words out there that began as negatives, stay negatives, and myself, I generally won't use those as powerful. Let's take back that word. I don't, bag on anyone who does by any means if they identify that way. But queer was actually initially a good word. It meant positive things like joy. Specifically. It was then weaponized, and I grew up with it being weaponized. I was not okay with it for a very long time. And then as a grown adult, I kind of came back around full circle and was like, the young people are bringing it back. And actually, it's a really nice word, and it's more encompassing, just like, I use the word gay all encompassing at times. By the way, not all lesbians appreciate that. But queer can be all-encompassing, and it can actually give people who don't have words to explain themselves more, like if they're like, well, I don't really have any words that really explain exactly my experience, they can use the word queer to just kind of like all-encompass, well, I'm not traditional in the way that I feel, so I am a queer person.
That is the voice of Mel Davis, who is the executive director of the Rainbow Alliance Advocacy. Also joining me this morning is Dana Johnson, the president and lead organizer with Fox Valley Pride. Mel, you bring up a really good point, which is how different people interpret words in different ways, and especially when it's your identity that you're talking about. So if I'm listening to the show right now, I might be feeling like, well, how am I supposed to talk about these things with people?
I think personally, the biggest thing if you're not part of the community, right? And then, by the way, we also had the IA2S Blessed, but we can get to that later.
There.
Okay. I also think that when we need to wait for someone to tell us, right? It's just like you, right? Dr. Kristen Lyerly. When I first met you, you also had a hyphen in your name, right? And so there were some points I was like, oh, who is she? And is she, do I call her Dr. Lyerly? Do I call her Kristen? And again, knowing how people identify, it's just about asking, right? It's the same with me. People can presume I'm a gay man, whether I present male, I present, more masculine, depending on how I dress and that identity. But again, I get misgendered all the time, actually, because whether it's in an email or it's on the phone, because I'm Dana Johnson, right? And most people assume that that's kind of a feminine name, which is interesting because I get a lot of misgendered literature in the mail and a lot of misgendered calls and a lot of interesting things that I'm like, oh, even my doctor gets it wrong sometimes, which is weird because it's in my medical chart. But it's one of those things that I think we just have to ask people, how do you identify? What does that feel like? And then we go from there.
Yeah, checking in is definitely key because everyone has their own experience and uses potentially different language. And even if they use the same language for people who are not in the community, just to make things simple, it's really easy to just, first of all, do it in a kind way, but also a way that's not a big deal. It's not supposed to be a big deal. Someone being a trans person, someone being a queer person, someone being a gay person or lesbian person or any other identifying factor, it's not like, hey, we want to be up in your face. We want it to be a big deal. That's not what's happening. It's really like, okay, we just really want respect. Anyone just really wants the same amount of respect that we give other people. So, just saying, okay, well, what are you comfortable with? Like, do you have pronouns that you would prefer me to use for you? Or do you have pronouns that you use that I may not be familiar with? Some people have what they call preferred pronouns. A lot of people have pronouns that are, in fact, their pronouns that people may or may not expect from them based on the way they present, because identity and presentation do not have to match. And that's something that is very confusing for a lot of people, understandably, who are not part of the community. It can be very confusing because colonization has really taken its toll. And what that basically means is that as a society, and Dana, I would love to hear your input on this as well. As a society, though, we've really kind of made this duality of genders. Men, women, in the 50s, we started doing pink and blue.
Yeah. And it used to be reversed.
Right.
So when babies were born, for example, it used to be the pink color was more for males presenting, and then females was actually the blue. So it's interesting how that's kind of switched.
Yeah, and all the babies in dresses, like all the little boys in dresses and things like that. It was really common. So we just kind of, as a society, we're like, hey, let's start doing things this very specific way. Really, we're just kind of like, people are just realizing that's kind of silly. Why are we doing this? And so just checking in with people and seeing what's comfortable for them and not making a big deal. And if you make a mistake, don't make a big deal. Yeah. Say, excuse me, or I'm sorry, how can I do that better next time? Make a sincere effort. And
I think the hard part for me sometimes is when people are about to get it wrong or they're not even sure, but then they're like, oh, whatever. Right? Or they'll say things like, oh, the alphabet people or something like that. And I'm like, no. It's LGBTQ. You just stop there and say plus. If you can't say the whole thing like I do, okay, great. But it's also like, okay, I got it wrong. Oops, sorry. And we laugh. Like there's a point when it also becomes your responsibility as another person to learn what that is, right? Because we wouldn't want to continue to do that because it can be rather oppressive. And sometimes we're like, oh, whose responsibility is it? It's all our responsibility to understand the differences that we might have, I think.
Sure.
Yeah. It's okay to make a mistake.
Yeah.
But if you're repeatedly making the mistake and not learning from it, that's different. That feels like disrespect.
Yeah. It's the accountability side.
Yeah.
It's the intent, versus impact. Yeah. So it's the idea is, it doesn't have to be a big deal. And so if you're taking accountability and you're making an effort, it's not a big deal. Making mistakes are understandable. You don't have to pre-excuse yourself. Everyone knows that mistakes happen. If you just are making a sincere effort, it's actually really, really obvious. Believe it or not, it's really obvious when people are making a sincere effort. So you don't have to stress so much.
And when you were discussing pronouns a little bit there, Mel, too, the one thing I've learned, because I do this sometimes with my friends that identify with different pronouns like they or them. And again, the Oxford University has told us that is both singular and plural. So just so everyone knows that you can do that, because we had to learn it when I was in higher ed, because we learned that people would write in that person, and technically it's first person they. But what's interesting is even I sometimes get it wrong, or I misgender my friends that are in these communities because of how my brain thinks that they're presenting versus what they're actually identifying as. So I just replace it with their name, right? Instead of saying they or he or she, I'll just be like, Mel said this and Mel did that and Mel's coming over and Mel.
Yeah,
and it's so much easier just to say the name.
Yeah. And it's so much more personal.
Yeah.
Because I get confused with they, because when I grew up in English class, they was a plural thing. And if you used they instead of he or she, your hand was slapped.
Well, unless you were talking about someone whose gender you didn't know.
Right, that's true. Yes.
When you're talking, and that's really the whole point here, because if we're talking about the police officer who gave us a ticket, but you don't know who it was because it was a parking ticket, right? Well, that person did blah, blah, blah. They gave me a ticket, right?
Yeah. Well, this is amazing. We did not get to all of the letters, but when we come back, Pride might be new to our audience, but it is not a new thing to Northeast Wisconsin. And we're going to talk about the history of Pride right here in our own backyard.
You're listening to Civic Media. Stay up to date on the latest news and information for your local community and Wisconsin by signing up for our free email newsletter. Visit civicmedia.us/email to get started.
Welcome back to the Dr. Kristen Lyerly Show. It's me, Dr. Kristen Lyerly, and we are talking about Pride with Dana Johnson, president and lead organizer with Fox Valley Pride, and the executive director of Rainbow Alliance Advocacy, Mel Davis. And before we get back to our conversation, I just wanted to highlight the music that we're listening to because we do that with every episode. So that was a delightful group. It is Betsy Aid and the Well-Known Strangers. And they were brought to my attention actually by you, Dana.
Yeah, she and the whole band are amazing. And actually, Appleton Pride in 2023, we had Appleton Pride. 2024, we became Fox Valley Pride, and we had them perform at Fox Valley Pride in 2024. But Betsy and her group have won multiple WAMI awards, right? Wisconsin Association Music Industry Awards. And she hails, I think, from Racine or Kenosha. I always forget which one. But kind of near my hometown. So just love Betsy Aid, and she's just amazing, an amazing person, amazing songwriter. If you listen to her lyrics, they're really in depth about some of the struggles in particular she's had and of the community that we're talking about today. So it's really, really an intentional experience. And if you ever get to see her live, she'll bring you to tears, and then she'll make you dance with joy. So she's pretty amazing.
I love that.
Yeah.
When I asked you about music, you rattled off about 5 different bands. Yes. And then, Mel, you were like, oh, and did you remember this and this and that? I mean, there's so much joy and music in the community, which I guess is it's a reflection.
So local. And there's a lot that are right here in northeastern Wisconsin, as well as, Betsy travels a little bit further. But I got introduced to her starting with Mila Music. So she was a headliner there for a while.
There's a lot of great talent. And I love when they get to perform at Mile.
Yeah. Yeah, especially when there's queer artists. So,
oh, yeah. I got to see the Traveling Suitcase on the bus last year, and that was one of the most fun things. It was great.
We are going to highlight Traveling Suitcase in an upcoming episode.
Yes.
Yes, still during Pride Month.
They're fun. They're a younger band.
Yeah.
I'm new to Betsy Aid, so I'm going to have to check
her
that
out.
band
She's
out.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. And she's got lots of stuff out on YouTube. So links will be in the show
notes. I think she has a new
notes.
album, actually. You're never on the show.
That's a great idea. Okay, Todd, take notes.
Working on it.
Okay, there are a couple letters in the acronym that we did not get to define. Can we do that quickly before we talk about the history of Pride in Northeast Wisconsin?
Sure. So we said transgender. Do you want to define that?
Oh, you go ahead.
Okay.
I mean, I get into the weeds.
I mean, you do it, you go as far as you want. I think it's important. Go ahead.
I mean, this section is a little short. So.
Okay.
But so I actually generally, when I go to the T, I just use the word trans because there are a lot of different trans and then end of the word. And basically what that means is, I'm going to say it, anything that's not cis. So that's something that throws a lot of people for a loop.
CIS.
What is cis? Not a slur. It is not a bad thing for anyone out there feeling like, oh my gosh, cisgender, a cis person is absolutely great. It's fine. It's just a person who basically, this is the way I generally put it, a person who was, here we go. When the baby is born, we get to start from the beginning. The doctor looks at the external genitalia only and says, we'll go with, it's a boy. Okay. Baby starts to grow, starts being called a young boy, is comfortable doing what our society deems as typical boy things. Likes to wear blue, for example, likes to play with trucks, likes to do sports, various things like that, is comfortable being called a boy, is comfortable engaging in boy things, likes to, behave the way society says boys should behave.
And socially, we do that, right? Parents gave me a dump truck. They gave me G.I. Joes, right? So they did it in a way. They gave me that to help me develop that into that sense of identity.
Right. And so the child's very comfortable. And so as they grow through teen years, same thing continues. They're still very comfortable in those ways, comfortable performing those ways, up into what then they would be considered manhood, right? Still extremely comfortable, like behaving the way that society deems that men should behave, think, all the things. That is what a cisgender person is. They are comfortable with the way that society has deemed that they should behave based on the external genitalia that the doctor said, this is the way the person should behave when they were born, right? Doesn't matter what's inside or any other thing like that. It's just what they're looking at on the outside. So trans is literally anything else. Now, there's a little bit of controversy there because some people who are non-binary, for example, don't necessarily identify as trans.
And non-binary, not male or female, because the binary construction that we talked about earlier in the show.
Right. Or some combination of both.
Right.
But technically, if we're just really getting technical, the trans umbrella is anything that is not cisgender. It is anything where the person is not comfortable 100% with, yep, the doctor said, I have this genitalia. I'm a boy. I do all the boy things. This is how I like to be called a boy. He, him, his, all those things. So, that's basically the trans general definition there. And then we can get kind of more into more specifics later. But
what about briefly with the rest of the acronym?
Yeah, so intersexed is generally similar to what Mel was saying. Maybe a child is born with mixed genitalia, so to speak, and generally doctors and parents often make a decision right there, which you might be familiar with. But sometimes they allow a child to and the parents to decide later because they want to, whether it's a functioning genitalia to be able to produce and whatever else. But so intersexed individuals are in that category of, where are we going to go? They used to have a different term as well, but
we don't use that term anymore. But it could be a mixture of chromosomes as well, or internal reproductive organs.
That's one of the really hard things that I think people don't understand. And I can add as a physician that everybody doesn't have an X and a Y or an X and an X. Some people have 2 X's and a Y. Some people have 3 X's and a Y. So it can be very confusing and not nearly as straightforward as society would lead us to believe. Yeah. I think the lesson to be learned here is that your letter doesn't define you and you are just a person. And just don't be afraid to talk to each other.
for sure.
Yeah. We didn't even get to talk about the history. We'll have to do that in our next segment.
Okay.
All right, because we're going to come back here shortly. This is Dr. Kristen Lyerly. You're listening to the Dr. Kristen Lyerly Show. Welcome back to the Dr. Kristen Lyerly Show. I'm Dr. Kristen Lyerly, and I'm here with Dana Johnson, President and Lead Organizer with Fox Valley Pride, and the Executive Director of Rainbow Alliance Advocacy, Mel Davis. We're talking about Pride. It's June, so it's all about Pride. If you missed the beginning of our conversation, you can always find it wherever you get your podcasts, and you can always find me here on Saturdays and Sundays at 3 on WGBW and WISS, and of course, streaming on the Civic Media app. Do you have the Civic Media app?
I do.
Oh, it's so good.
Yes.
I mean,
is that truthful, or are you just saying that?
No, I really, I do. So ever since I learned,
I'm going to now.
Yes.
Yeah, ever since Dr. Lyerly started the show, I was like, oh, what's this thing? And then I was like, oh, I've got to download this thing so I can hear the shows and all the different things and historical pieces. And,
it's so good because there's so much Wisconsin-based information there, and it's like people who are in our environment. It's Pat Kreitlow in the morning. It's Maggie Dawn. It's Milwaukee. It's Madison. It's us. It's
I
who we
can't
are.
wait to download it.
Yeah. Awesome. Do it.
Okay, I'm going
Dana,
to.
we're going to finish up real quick with defining.
Okay, so LGBTQ, we did that. Then we did I, and then A is asexual. That's a whole other category, which we don't have time for today. And then we have 2S+. So Two-Spirited Plus is what the First Nation, Indigenous, Native American folks call the people that would have been in this community long time before we were ever here, Kristen, right? And just to let you know, too, there's going to be a special, the Oneida Nation powwow that's coming up June 27th through the 29th. On the 28th, they're going to have a special honoring Two-Spirit powwow experience for that community. So super excited.
Beautiful.
Again,
Last year was beautiful.
yeah, and Two-Spirited, again, very celebrated by our indigenous tribes throughout the United States. And each one differs, each tribe different, but just recognizing there were two kind of connections, one in the physical realm, one in the spiritual realm. And so people in this community, LGBTQIA2S+, were considered to be kind of revered for having this, both the just the majesty of who they were, because they could do all sorts of things within the tribe. And I'm not doing it well justice, but
So they would often have they were typically looked at as having both masculine and feminine spirits. And it's a very, very deep spiritual understanding and feeling within the person. Oftentimes they were medicine people. They were people who gave names to babies. I mean, they were extremely, elders. They were extremely well.
So in my mind, they were getting it right.
Oh, absolutely. And I do want to add too, just real quick, is that A also can stand for agender and ally.
Oh,
Not
yes,
everyone
true.
likes
That's
to
true.
include ally, but I do because
Okay.
I feel extremely strongly that we cannot be here and as strong as we are without our allies,
Sure.
because we are a marginalized community. We don't have the numbers. We are important. We are an important part of the society. We are an important community. We're important people. Many of us, most of us, we are loving people, and so are our allies.
That's where I fit.
Yes, you are.
And
Yeah.
so I always want to make sure that, at least personally, I like to include that our allies can be part of that as well, because some allies actually fit within our community as a straight cis person, and they're just with us,
Yeah.
100%. So
How can we be better allies?
Go ahead. Do you want to?
Because I think I'm doing a good job, but I know I can do better, and I don't see it from your eyes.
education would be my first go-to. And what that means is educating on what's happening today. So like history is wonderful, but knowing what's happening today in the community is huge. Talking to the people who are part of the community, especially the trans community, and even more so trans youth and trans seniors. We're looking at a lot of pain.
Yeah.
A lot of people are in some serious pain, and we're looking at a lot of pain coming forward at us. So not everyone is in a space where they can necessarily get out and do something, for whatever the reason may be. So the first step to being a good ally is to check in with people, to love them and to believe them. Don't challenge people. Someone says, I'm being attacked. Say, okay, how can I help you in your situation?
How can I help?
Yeah. And I also think, allyship comes in many forms as Mel's identifying. I think, supporting causes like we're going to, we think about Fox Valley Pride Fest. There's the new Pride Fest in Green Bay. There's the Oshkosh Pride. And then there's all these smaller community events. Attending as an ally, you can go. We want you with us, right?
Yes, always.
And always. Or if you can add a rainbow flag to your house, so I'm not the only one. So I'm not the only one, everyone's looking at or perhaps targeting, those sorts of things. And just being someone that stands up and not be a bystander, right? And there's so many things going on with legislation across the nation that I also think we need people to write the letters, send the postcards, and go to the town halls if that's your level of advocacy. Because I can't do it alone, right? If we've got 365 million people in this country, and 10%, maybe if we just go by that number, 36 million of us are in this acronym, that's not enough to help further what I would like to call living.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and if so, something that a lot of people who are not part of the community don't necessarily know, by the way, the numbers are actually much greater. People who are part of the community who are not out, the numbers is large. If you are really talking about reality, it's probably closer to 30%. If you don't know someone in your own friend group, or you don't know someone in your own family who identifies as LGBTQ plus or LGBTQIA2S plus, you are probably not a safe person.
Or they're not ready. They don't feel comfortable.
Well, that's
because of the environment that they are in.
Let me be more clear. So when I say that, I don't mean that you yourself are not safe. What I mean is that they don't feel like they are safe yet.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
So that I said that poorly. Pardon me, please. I would like to rephrase
That's okay.
and say that that person or those people, because sometimes we say things that we don't realize we're saying.
Yes, because they're the dominant messages in our culture, and we reinforce these messages, not even realizing that we're doing it.
Yeah.
And I just want to mention, I'm here with Dana Johnson, the president and lead organizer with Fox Valley Pride, and speaking, you hear the executive director of Rainbow Alliance Advocacy, Mel Davis. Continue your thought, please.
So some of the most important things also for allyship is really being aware of how we're talking, like being aware of the things that we're saying. So, for example, parents and family members, especially if you're wanting to be allies, having political conversations around your youth is not advisable. Even if you feel like you are saying things that are positive, it can come across negatively if you're not knowing where your youth is standing. If you are uncomfortable using they, them, their pronouns and you exclaim that in front of another person, that in and of itself can make a person feel like, okay, this is not someone I can come out to.
And I remember, Kristen, I shared with you a long time ago when we first met, kind of my coming out story. But, I knew around age 5, right?
I was
knew,
6.
I knew there was this kid down the street, Billy, and he was just, there was just something about it. I couldn't explain it. I didn't know what the terms were, right? But I remember feeling that same thing at 7 and then 10 and then 12. But, my parents, while they were supporting a little bit later on in life, when I wanted to watch a movie, I remember the first gay themed movie that I watched was The Birdcage. But I watched it at a friend's house, right? Great movie. But I watched it at a friend's house. This is 1990s, right?
Yeah.
And I came home and I told them about it. And they were like, you can't watch films like that. So immediately the message was, Dana, if you are even part of that community, we're not your people.
And that's probably not what they meant to say, but it's
censorship begins it.
It's complicated. Yeah. It's hard. And again, we don't sometimes realize the messages that we are putting out into the world until we stop and think about, oh, wait a minute, this actually means this to the person I'm talking to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and little things especially if we're talking about gender nonconforming, non-binary or trans children, anything along those lines, they can know as early as 3, not to say that everyone does, by the way, but they might. And saying things like, oh, you have to wear a pink dress because you're a little girl, or you can't wear a pink dress because you're a little boy. Those things, again, like Dana said, are those are the situations where we're telling our youth, you are not accepted. And those are the things where our youth are going, oh, maybe I can't actually say my truth to this person in my life. Not to say that later on they'll still feel that way. They could eventually feel totally differently, especially if later on you're like, oh, my message was maybe not so great. I'm going to do a little better. I'm going to just keep trying to do a little better here, a little better there, just keep doing better. They'll see it. They'll absolutely see it. And then you can become that safe person, that person that they confide in.
So you mentioned that we know about 10% of the people in the United States identify
10 to 30.
as
We'll keep it somewhere in there.
I was going to say, but it could be 20% more. So there are plenty of people in Northeast Wisconsin who are part of this community. Yes. I was shocked when I looked at the history of Wisconsin, and this is like brief, but the Neville Museum has a wonderful online resource that looks at the national, state, and regional history of the community. We were a leader. I mean, it was Governor Dreyfus who signed a bill into law back in 1982, making Wisconsin the first state in the nation providing anti-discrimination protections for gay, lesbian, and bisexual people in housing, employment, and public accommodations.
Isn't that fun? Most people don't know that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Isn't that fun?
Yeah. Well,
but somehow we still don't have those same protections for trans people. That kind of blows my mind.
And we're trying to take them away, right? There are things that have happened before and since then that have essentially done that. And even people in the state of Wisconsin, after marriage equality was a federal push, there was going to be a federal push, and states were moving towards that. In the state of Wisconsin, if you remember in 2006, we decided to add to the Wisconsin Constitution. Well, I didn't decide that, but other people did. It was like a 49% vote, right? Yeah, that they decided that a marriage could only be between a husband and a wife, which is a huge issue when it comes to, I work in the child welfare system, right? And at the policy level, which becomes a huge problem when we can only have this male and this female parent either adopting children or having parental rights and things like that, becoming foster parents, So I think it's interesting that we went that far so early. And then as all social movements happen, right? There's a wave of growth, and then there's a pushback and a wave of growth. And we saw this in the women's liberation movement. We saw it in kind of Black Power and African American and having rights in those spaces, right? Moving forward and then pushback. So I think I'm hopeful that all the pushback we're getting in our transgender community right now, hopefully will then get
Move
over
us
those
forward.
hurdles, move us forward to a greater spot. And all just because people want to survive, all because people want to live. And it's so interesting. And when you think about that 10 to 30%, I think it's interesting the legislation happening, particularly around trans youth and trans sports, that kind of get me like, if you were to take the number of the 10%, 36 million, and let's just say 1% were transgender, it's probably more than that. I mean, we're looking at 364,000 people, maybe 700,000 people in the United States. Then you have all the kids that would actually be in a sport, which is probably maybe 30,000,
significantly less for
ineligible,
sure.
right? And so we're literally legislating across the country for 30,000 potential kids. That
We
just seems
know,
crazy,
though.
right?
We know that it is crazy, and it has nothing to do with that.
It's just so weird.
Yeah.
So weird.
Hey, this conversation is way too good and way too interesting. We only have one segment left. But when we get to that segment, let's talk about some of the things that are happening across the region with regards to Pride, Valley Pride, here in Green Bay, down in Oshkosh. There's so much good stuff happening. So if people want to jump on board like they should, we'll show them how. This is Dr. Kristen Lyerly. You are listening to the Dr. Kristen Lyerly Show.
To talk for a few. It amazes me how I can still feel that breeze rush right through me.
You're listening to Civic Media. Find the latest news, information, and archives of all your favorite shows on the Civic Media website, civicmedia.us.
Welcome back to the Dr. Kristen Lyerly Show. I am Dr. Kristen Lyerly, and we're talking about Pride with Dana Johnson, president and lead organizer with Fox Valley Pride, and Mel Davis, the executive director of Rainbow Alliance Advocacy. This has been such an enlightening conversation, and I really, truly can't thank you both enough for sharing your experiences and helping us navigate conversations that are awkward sometimes. And challenging, and maybe giving some of us the tools to be able to have conversations in spaces where we haven't felt comfortable. I'm talking about allies.
Yeah.
Where
Thank
we
you for
haven't
having-
felt comfortable.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I would say thanks for having it. And also,
Yeah.
we do not speak for the entirety
we don't.
of the community, and we particularly our BIPOC, individuals and what they experience and the intersectionality that's
Yeah.
part of that experience. So also recognizing we represent Dana and Mel,
Yeah.
and our experiences in however many years we've been here.
So Dana and Mel, there are some really great things that are happening all across the month of June, right here in Northeast Wisconsin, where, by the way, there used to be maybe there still is, an annual summer celebration in Hilbert on a
Oh,
farm.
is there?
Yes.
I don't
I'm
know
not
about
familiar
this.
with that one.
I know,
I don't
but-
even know where Hilbert is. I'm going to be
Like
really
just
honest.
southeast of here. Hey,
Yeah.
There are all of these little celebrations that have
Yeah.
popped up. Some have popped up and gone away. Some have popped up and been persistent. We've got the Napoli's Lounge that is one
yeah.
of the
Yeah.
Yes. There are long-standing strongholds, and then there are these beautiful celebrations that are happening. Dana, talk to us about Valley Pride.
Yeah, so Fox Valley Pride is this year. It's June 21st, Jones Park, Appleton. Goes from 1 until 8. We actually have a Pride Promenade that's going to happen on College Avenue right before it.
Is that a
that's
parade?
That's a new thing. It's not a parade. It's a walk,
Okay.
but it's a promenade. And people can sign up to do that or just show up at about 11:15 to get ready. Walk through the farmer's market. There's going to be a celebration at Houdini Plaza because it's Make Music Day down in Appleton. And then head over to the festival. So Fox Valley Pride's the big one. Oshkosh Pride is June 29th. And then New Pride, the one that's, formerly kind of or part of Green
Northeast
Bay is
Wisconsin
Northeastern
Pride.
Wisconsin. Yeah, is they're in September. We want to carry Pride beyond it. So they do it
Yeah.
September 19th and
Yeah, and
20th.
Oshwabanon.
Yeah, and then there's all the other places. Sheboygan, there's like picnics in some of these communities, right? Fond du Lac. So, but Fox Valley Pride.
Well,
yeah.
Green Bay had a
Stevens
flag
Point.
raising over
did.
the weekend, which
Yep.
is such a huge deal. I don't know if you know about this, but Wello is an organization here in Green Bay. And we just received this Culture of Health Prize for doing exactly this, for elevating vulnerable populations. And part of that was Green Bay has a perfect score when it comes to supporting our LGBTQ plus
The MEI
community.
score.
Yes.
Right.
Now, it's a score, and it definitely doesn't mean
It
we're
factors
there.
in a lot of things.
But we've come so far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very far from a few years ago. It was only like 60 something. So it's come a
Okay.
long way.
Yes. And I think you were just about to say there are also celebrations in Fond du Lac and Wausau and
Oh, so
Sheboygan.
So many. Central Wisconsin Pride. Stevens
Central
Point
Wisconsin Pride. Woo.
Yeah, Milwaukee Pride is this weekend actually coming up.
Yes.
Yes. Madison. I mean, you name Hudson.
Who knows?
Who
Everywhere.
knows? Yeah, this is the time.
Too few Saturdays.
Every single weekend in June, people are like, you want to do something in June? I'm like, no.
Yeah.
I'm going to work every day. We're
and
cool.
I think what's really important, there's two things really important, right? Just so people, like I love the American flag. I love the pride flag. The pride flag is a cultural flag. It's not this other like everyone should be this way or we're trying to push this on people. It's a cultural flag that celebrates and also identifies there's a culture and there's been this oppressive thing that's happened and people have been discriminated. So it's kind of representing of that. The other thing that's interesting is just this idea Pride Month is here because of the things that have happened, the historical things like at the Stonewall in 1969, but before that there was a food fight in Compton, LA. That's actually, so coast to coast, there were challenges in the 60s. And so just recognizing that it's Pride Month, and if you're not into it, you don't have to be, right? And there's many other things that you can celebrate, but it's here because there are people that it is a culture. And people don't recognize it often as a culture. They use all these other terms for it. So just want to highlight for me, that's why it's important.
So
like
kind of
that.
the same way as like there's Irish Fest or German, like Oktoberfest.
Yeah.
It's Pride.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and it helps to. So, in my eyes, even though there's a lot more to it, this is really just kind of being really simplistic as possible. It's a celebration of acceptance and love.
Oh, yes. Say that
So-
one more time really loud.
So, for me, it's a celebration of acceptance and love.
Yeah.
And I don't mean love like sexuality. I mean love like really appreciating our neighbors, really appreciating our family, the people who are around us, and accepting them for who they are without boundaries or limitations. Sometimes we don't agree with that. I admit sometimes I struggle with accepting some of the people in my life for other reasons, but it's really meant to be just that in my mind.
And to that point, though, I also think so people ask me, like, why do you do Fox Valley Pride, for example? Because sometimes we take a little bit of heat as the organizers. Some people reach out to us, they send us letters and basically saying we're terrible people, we should, and they use a lot of religiosity in that. But I will tell you, when I show up to that festival, and I've done this work for a year, it's a year worth of planning, and I've got 10 people on this planning committee. When I show up, and there's someone that says they're 68 years old and they say, this is the first Pride I've ever been to. I can finally be myself.
Yeah.
Or I have the 8-year-old that says, my mom brought me because we recognize that all people should be loved, respected,
Yes.
and have rights. And I look at that and I get chills and I think to myself, this is why we do it.
And
Love.
yeah, and what Dana's talking about is real. I experienced that at all of our events as well. I mean, I just recently had a 68-year-old trans woman who's just transitioning talk to me about not even knowing what Pride was. I told her about Pride Month and she said, what is that? I mean, it's just amazing.
Well, she has lots of opportunities to learn about it this June. Mel, Dana, I honestly cannot thank you enough.
Thank you so much for having
Thank
us.
you
It's
so
been
much
an
for having
honor
us.
for sure.
Happy
Yeah.
Pride, friends.
Happy Pride.
All right, if you missed any of our conversation, you can catch it on civicmedia.us or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to come back every Saturday and Sunday at 3 on WGBW in Green Bay, WISS in Appleton and Oshkosh, and streaming on the Civic Media app. We'll see you next time.
I've been looking for sweet thing that I adore. I think that you could light up my soul.
The national news cycle never stops, but it can be hard to find news about your local community. Civic Media is dedicated to providing quality local and state news coverage across Wisconsin. With the Civic Media app, you can get notifications about local stories that matter to you and your community. Find the free Civic Media app in your phone's app store and choose notifications from the menu to tell us what kind of news you want to hear about.